a lot of people, when they're looking into Orthodoxy, they see the long services, or they see especially in the fasting. A lot of people say, "Oh, I can't fast meat for 40 days or whatever. I can't fast dairy for 40 days, or I can't these services or whatever." But God gives you the grace to do what He wants you to
Hmm.
do.
That's right.
So for those monks, God gives them the grace to live that lifestyle, and like you said, and you'll acclimatize to it. And I assume you probably acclimatize to it eventually.
Yeah.
And God just gives you the grace. So if you're thinking about doing Orthodoxy, going in, looking into Orthodoxy, but you don't think, oh, I can't do the fast and everything. Well, God will give you the grace. And as some of the saints would say, you do what you can. You can't
Hmm.
do it all. Okay, try. You try to do a little bit more next time, and
Yeah.
eventually, bit by bit, God will give you the grace to do whatever you do. And all of it's done for our salvation. None of it's done just to beat us to the ground or something. It's all done for us, for our salvation. It's all good for us. And and I was talking about something the other day with somebody, it's good for us to go through hard times, go through difficult times, go through suffering. It's good for us. We don't like it. Nobody likes it, I guess. But in modern day life, in most places, ease and comfort is what it's all about. So we have a much more difficult time with going through hardships or sufferings, or doing things that maybe in the past wouldn't have seemed that difficult. That maybe a different mindset. Life wasn't supposed to be easy and comfortable, but now we have that mindset. So, but again, I think God gives us the grace to overcome that if we want to.
Hmm.
So I would suggest nobody stay away from Orthodoxy because you think, oh well, they're doing this fasting, they're doing this praying, have these some we still even in the churches today, that's at times we have fairly long services, a few hours long. But again, God gives you the grace, and it's good for you. It's good for
Hmm.
us. It's good for our salvation. None of it's done just to do it. Everything is for our salvation. And once in a while, somebody will say, "Well, God spared me from, or I was in a horrible car crash, and God spared me, so He must have something for me to do." And He does. He wants you to
Uh-huh.
get saved.
Yeah.
Once you become godlike, He didn't save you so you can do some worldly thing that won't mean anything in eternity. He spared you so that you can, have salvation, and everything that we do is for salvation. All these things that Matt's talking about is for our salvation. So, but sometimes they have to be difficult, because that's the way you grow. If I was telling this person that if you're going through tough times and you needed somebody with you, would you choose the person who never had to go through tough times? Or you through and always had it easy, or somebody went through tough times and got bitter and angry about it. Somebody went through tough times and learned and improved because of it.
Hmm.
That's what you want, and that's what helps us just in even normal life outside of church, outside of Orthodoxy or being on Mount Athos, whatever. It's the difficult times. If we use them right, that allow us to grow. Not the easy times. The easy times are kind of like a rest, but it's the hard times that help us to grow.
Hmm.
So again, don't shy away from Orthodoxy because you think it's difficult. It can be difficult, but it's good. It's for our salvation. It's for our becoming godlike. And there
Yeah.
shouldn't be any reason to shy away from something that's going to help you be godlike.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Willard Preacher Podcast. I am Matt, a former student at Penn State um, and a convert to Orthodoxy, and I'm joined by Gary Cattell, who is Penn State's Willard Preacher and open air evangelist on the campus at Penn State University. How are you, Gary?
I'm doing well. Also a convert to Orthodoxy.
Very good, very good. It's you're back on campus.
Yeah,
Although I understand you head off today with a holiday. This is Martin Luther King Day that we're recording this. Um, so how are things going out on campus right now?
it's been cold. So when
Hmm.
it's cold, it can be a little slow.
Hmm.
Although I do go inside while classes are in session. Sometimes people stop by and talk and stuff, but it's better when it was a little bit warmer on Friday. So they had a little bit more people stopping by. We have had a couple of interesting conversations, at least to me. One was really wasn't a conversation. Somebody's been putting up these posters, and they're in Willard Building, and they're about these other street preachers that are downtown. They've been exempting me from the excoriation of these preachers, and just saying how bad they are and what they say and how they insult people and whatever. I've never heard them, so I don't know if it's true or if it's false. But anyhow, somebody wrote up on one of those posters, or like they're not really posters, just like something written out and posted up there. But so he still sucks. Gets in my way, and he tells people that says that good people are going to hell. Well, I don't know if I suck or not, but getting in their way is a little tough to back up, I think. I mean, you've got 40,000 students wandering around, one person standing still, getting in your way is probably not the case. But I do say that good people are going to hell if put in the right context. Um, so what I do is I say something along the lines of when I talk to people and ask them, "Do you think you're going to heaven or hell?" Very rarely over the years has anybody said, "I think I'm going to hell." Now, it used to happen occasionally. I don't think it happens anymore, but it used to happen occasionally. Most people say that they're going to heaven, and ask them why. They say, "Well, I'm a good person." Well, the obvious question is, what standard are you using to declare yourself to be good? And do you think God is going to use the same standard when he judges you? Well, most people, when they're calling themselves good, are either using a societal standard or they're using their own personal standard. Now, what are the odds that when we stand before God in the end, he's either going to use a early 20th century, early 21st century uh, societal standard or our own personal standard to judge us by? Right? It's not like, why would you use a modern day, early 21st century American standard? I mean, our standard is in the gutter. In America today, you can be a drunken, fornicating, sodomizing abortionist in the midst of a sex change, if that were possible, still be considered a good person. I mean, that's the standard God is going to use. So I think, the maxim is you have to meet the standard of the place you want to enter into. So if somebody wants to enter into Penn State, they can't go to the admissions office and say, "Well, I met the standard of my community college in my hometown. So can I get in here?" And they're going to laugh you out of the admissions office. Or if you want to come into the United States legally, you can't say, "Well, I met the standard of this other country. Can I get in here?" The answer is obviously going to be no, you can't. You have to meet the standard of the place you want to enter into. So if you want to enter into heaven, you have to meet the standard of heaven. Well, first of all, any standard of goodness in heaven is a pure goodness, undefiled, incorrupt, no bad thoughts, motivations, words, anything. Everything's perfectly pure and perfectly good all the time. That's the standard. So do you meet that standard? Probably not. Or definitely not. We have what any standard of or any goodness that we have in this world, unless you become, a holy saint or something, is a corrupted goodness. We're not totally evil, we're not totally good. We were created to be good, we're fallen, we've corrupted whatever goodness we had or whatever innocence we had when we were born. So we have a corrupted goodness. We can't knock on the doors of heaven in the end and say, "Hey, I belong here, let me in," when you have a corrupted goodness and they have a perfectly pure and incorrupt goodness. But it even goes beyond that. It goes to being godlike, which is how many steps above just being good. So, atheists would come up to me in the past and probably would still in the future, or would do now, I guess. If I haven't talked to too many recently, and say, "Look, I'm just as good as my Christian roommate or whatever, my Christian friend. If I keep all the morals of Christianity, why can't I go to heaven?" Even if you could do that, which I'm sure they didn't, all we have to do is call their parents and ask them, and we'll find out pretty quickly. But I'm sure that they didn't keep, this perfect goodness or whatever. But even if they did, they're not godlike. You can only become godlike through the God-man Jesus. So that's the standard. Everybody in heaven is perfectly good, incorrupt, and godlike. So the only way to do that is through the God-man Jesus. So that's why I say, good people are going to hell, because good is not good in our understanding of what good is not the good of heaven. And then again, you have to go past that to godlikeness. So when you just put something that up on a poster, of course, now she probably just heard a couple words going by or whatever, and then filled in the rest herself, or he. I don't know which one it was, but we just put something like that up on a poster. Of course, what do you mean? Good people are going to hell? Obviously the idea is good people go to heaven, bad people go to hell. I'm a good person, I must be going to heaven. But again, are you sure you're using the same standard of goodness? Because you can look really good under one standard, really bad under another standard. The analogy I used to use is, let's say there's a bunch of guys out, Old Main Lawn, in the spring, let's say, or fall, or whatever. It's rainy, muddy, and they're playing football. And they're playing football for a couple hours. And then the bells ring, and the guy says, "Oh, I got to go to class." Or said before that, the game breaks down. But they're sitting around, they're talking. One guy there is significantly less muddy and dirty than the rest. And so they said, "Oh, well, how'd you stay so clean? Everyone else is muddy from head to toe, and you've got pretty significant areas that aren't muddy." So I don't know. I played the same game you did. I don't know. And then the bells ring. And then he goes, "Oh, I got to go to class." He runs into class. Same look, same amount of mud. And everybody in there saying, "Oh, stay away from me. How'd you get so dirty? How'd you get so muddy? Stay, don't get near me." Same dirt, same mud. One place he's considered to be clean. The next place he's considered to be a mess. So it all depends on the standard being used. And the standard in heaven, of course, is what I said, perfectly good, godlike. And you can only do that through the God-man Jesus. Now, the other one was, I was talking to somebody, and I talked to him before. We've talked about, he's a believer and you can't lose your salvation. And we've gone over scriptures before, and I'll read to you real quick here in a minute, the scripture that he uses. But, he uses one particular scripture in Romans, and then I show him other scriptures which seem to indicate you can lose your salvation. He interprets the one in Romans to say that you can't. And here's the one in Romans. It's Romans chapter 8, verse 29, or 28, 20, or 38, 39. "If I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord." So he uses that to say, and not just him, but people who believe you can't lose your salvation. They say, nothing can separate us from Christ Jesus our Lord. Of course, my response is not just to give him scriptures which seem to go against his interpretation of that, but to say, yes, no creature can, no angels, no principalities, no other person, nothing can come between you and God. That doesn't mean you can't turn your back and walk away. Nothing outside yourself. No other creature outside yourself can do it, but you can do it yourself. And so we went down that road for just a couple of minutes, and I said, and he started to say, well, look, if you really read the Bible for what it means, just read it simply for what it's saying, then this is what it clearly says. I said, but yes, the people who disagree with you will say the same thing. And yet, they'll come down the exact opposite viewpoint than you do. I said, that's the problem with Sola Scriptura, the Bible alone, the scriptures alone, which is what Protestantism is based upon. They don't go by any sort of church tradition. It's just scriptures alone. So that's the problem with it. If you disagree on your sole authority, then, who's the referee? Or what is the referee? Who tells you who's right and who's wrong? The only authority you have, or the highest authority you have, or however you want to put it, is you disagree on. Now what? Well, now you start two different denominations, different churches, because there's no referee. There's no way to say who is right and who is wrong. And so I tried to explain to them that the scriptures cannot when I was first confronted with this, I searched the New Testament, and Old Testament, I guess, but searched the scriptures front and back, trying to find something that said Bible is the sole authority of Christianity. But I didn't think of at that time was the writers of the scriptures could not have believed in the Bible alone because there was no Bible. How could they write the scriptures are the sole authority when there weren't any scriptures? I suppose there's a Septuagint version of the Old Testament, but you can't get the New Testament doctrine from the Old Testament unless you already know the New Testament doctrine. So, and then you can kind of see, well, it kind of alluded to it here and alluded to it there. When Paul's writing his scriptures, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Peter, when these great saints are writing the scriptures, there was no Bible for them to allude to. There was no Bible to be the sole authority. There's no way. And then, of course, you have church as the pillar and the ground of truth, which is actually in the scriptures. Follow the tradition, whether written or oral, which is actually in the scriptures. And when the scriptures are talking about the church, they're talking about the church that was there at that time. One and undivided. They weren't talking about, 10,000 denominations, however many you think there are. So that's the basic problem. And that's why there's so many denominations in Protestantism, because there's the only authority you're going to disagree on. And then what do? You end up, the example I like to give, and I'm sure I've given it here before, is two guys sitting up on the wall at Willard Building a number of years ago. And they were talking about baptism. One said baptism saves you. One says it's just symbolic. They both say they study the scriptures. They both seem to be serious Protestant Christians. Both say they studied the scriptures. They both said the Holy Spirit leads them. Yet they came down on two completely different, sides of the issue. So how do you know who's right? And that's why, that's why Bible wars don't work either. And again, the example I like to use for this is predestination and free will. So both of those things are in the scriptures. Predestination's in the scriptures, free will's in the scriptures. One person believes in free will, one person believes in predestination. Who's right? Well, the person who believes in free will is going to use that as their primary scripture, primary belief. And they're going to interpret those scriptures on predestination in the light of the free will, their belief in free will. And the people that believe in predestination are going to use that as their primary and interpret the scriptures on free will in light of the scriptures in light of their belief in predestination. And there's no way to come to an agreement. So if you look in the book of Acts, when there's this huge disagreement as to whether you had to become Jewish to be Christian, circumcised, follow the law, whatever. They didn't say let's simply look at the scriptures and that's it. They came together and there was the authorities. The apostles were the authority. They came discussed it. They said this seems good to the Holy Spirit to us, and they wrote essentially a letter to all the churches and said this is the conclusion we've come to. That was binding on all the churches. So how do you do that now? If all the Baptists came together and wrote a letter to all the Pentecostals are just going to throw it in the trash. It doesn't have any authority at all on the Pentecostals, and same in the reverse. So it clearly doesn't work. And it's not a matter of just reading the scriptures. There's the old saying, the Bible says that I believe it, that settles it. Well, if that was true, then there wouldn't be all these denominations. You think and you think it says it, and you believe it says it. And most people, I know this particular person a little bit, and I know that he learned his beliefs from the person who evangelized him. And that's the way it is for most people. They come into the church or come into some sort of, whatever congregation, and that congregation teaches them. The pastor teaches them. Well, what it's supposed to be is you come into the church. So, when I was Protestant, people come and say, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? I kind of, believe in Jesus. What do I have to do? And I'd say, well, read the scriptures and do this and do this. Now I say, well, come into the church. Church is the body of Christ. Come into the church. They'll teach you about Jesus. They'll teach you about Christ. They'll teach you about the doctrine. They'll teach you everything. And then you'll be baptized and brought into the church. But you have to kind of symbolize all that, allegorize all that or something, whatever the right word would be when you're Protestant, because you can't say that it's truly the body of Christ, because the body of Christ can't be divided. maybe divided into tens of thousands of different, sects and denominations and whatever. It has to be united, it has to be one. And that's the way the Orthodox Church has been done through the years. There have been heretics, but those heretics have been cut off and will continue to be cut off ultimately. So anyhow, I don't know if that all made sense or not. I hope it did. If anybody has any questions, they can write to us. But it's kind of been my even in the call, we still got a couple good conversations in.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Um, yeah, it makes it. My wife and I, we went away this weekend. We went down to San Antonio. When we go down there, we visit another Orthodox parish, and right now they're building. So they do their Sunday liturgy in a. It just so happened for temporarily they're doing their Sunday liturgy in a Seventh Day Adventist building, and what I realized is, oh wait, the Seventh Day Adventists don't have an altar because the Orthodox community there brought their own altar and set up some icons and so forth. And what you realize is there is such variability amongst all the Protestants because they don't have any real standard by which to judge things. So some of them will have an altar and some of them won't. Some of them will think that communion is helpful in terms of salvation. Some it's totally a symbol, and some they hardly ever do it at all, if at all. So, um, having been Orthodox for 25 years or whatever, anytime we sort of encounter that sort of variability, it's a little bit of a shock to the system, just because it's like, wait a second, these things that we sort of are used to and take for granted, such as sound doctrine, theology, and liturgical worship and all that, it's all that's up for grabs if you're using Sola Scriptura.
Yeah,
So
I was in the midst of some of my friends this past weekend, and they were all Protestant, and they were talking about the different doctrines they believe, and of course they didn't agree on the different doctrines. And I thought it was interesting that back when I was Protestant, and Protestants still today, most of them anyhow, will say there's only one true religion. All the religions aren't right. There's only one true, and that's Christianity. Then you get within Christianity, and you can't say there's only one true doctrine. You can say it, but you can't know for sure what it is. So, in fact, most of them don't even necessarily believe you can know for sure what it is.
mhm.
You can think you are. Everyone says what they believe, and therefore they think it's right, but you can't know it to be right. So where Jesus said, "I am the truth." Well, that shouldn't just be for general Christianity versus other religions. It should be within Christianity. You should be able to know the truth. How do you know that truth? And again, you can't say the Bible because even though everything in the Bible is true, you can't know exactly what those truths are. If you could, then there wouldn't be all these denominations.
Yes, absolutely. Well, good. I'm glad you're having some good conversations out there. That's awesome.
Yes.
So, well, so I think we wanted sort of as our main topic for tonight, we wanted to talk about something that is very much unique to Orthodoxy, which is, we might just say broadly, Orthodox monasticism, but we're specifically talking about a place called Mount Athos, right? So that's Athos. Um, so, yeah, Gary, you and I, maybe when was it? About 2006 or so, we got to
2016.
spend a bit of time. We went together with Father John, our priest of blessed memory, and a couple other people, and so we shared that trip. So we wanted to talk about our time there, and then I also had gone, I guess, a couple years after that, or something like that. For an extended period of time. So just sort of to share our experiences on what is called the Holy Mountain, Mount Athos. So um, maybe as just a way of introduction, um, let me show maybe a couple of pictures just to kind of uh, give some folks something to put in their minds. 60 Minutes did a little feature story, 10 or 12 minutes long, about the Holy Mountain. I don't know, it might have been 12, 15 years ago, but it's very nice as far as sort of seeing it for um, just having an image of it. at any rate.
Yeah, it was amazingly good for 60 minutes.
Yeah, 60
You know,
minutes.
it wasn't against it or anything. It just they went in there. They basically just said that this is what they experienced, and they interviewed the monks, and the monks told them. So if you have a chance to see that it's on YouTube. If you have a chance to see it, 60 minutes on Mount Athos. That it's not. There's lots of good things about Mount Athos. That's the one that I've watched that I thought was pretty good.
Okay. So I'm going to start by just sharing a map. Um, and so this is basically what we're looking at is maybe I'll zoom out just a little bit. This is Greece. This is all of Greece. This is northern Greece near Thessalonica. So the Thessalonians from First and Second Thessalonians and in the St. Paul's epistle. Um, so if you basically go down the this peninsula, there are three peninsulas that stick out um, into the Aegean Sea, and the easternmost one is basically it's probably about 20 miles long and maybe I don't know 8 to 10 miles wide, something like that. And so this entire peninsula, this piece of land, is referred to as Mount Athos. So I'll zoom in just a little bit. And this um, so this piece of land is actually it's not technically a part of Greece. It's actually an independent monastic republic. It is under the authority of the Patriarch of Constantinople. Um, and essentially, what you have on Mount Athos are it's the entire space is dedicated to the Orthodox monastic life. There are 20 main monasteries, and some of these you can see on this map. Um, there are 20 main monasteries and then a bunch of other smaller dependencies and little skeets and everything in between. So, uh, but basically, for over 1,000 years, there's been a consistent, dedicated space um, for monastic life, Orthodox monastic life on the what is known as the Holy Mountain. Now, if as you go down this peninsula, there actually is a mountain on the uh, towards the end of this peninsula that is Mount Athos itself. I think the peak is something like a little over 5,000 feet. So that is kind of like technically the mountain itself. It rises straight out of the Aegean Sea. Um, but at any rate, so that's kind of just to give you a geographic, if you're watching this, just a little bit of a geographic idea. Uh, and actually, if you look at any globe, you can locate um, these three little tiny uh, peninsulas, and then again, the easternmost peninsula is Mount Athos. And then so as are zooming in, some of these monasteries that they're mentioning, um, I'll just keep zooming in. This one here, Serapatamo, is the main monastery that Gary and I visited. And just to give you a picture of what that looks like, some of these main monasteries, they kind of look like almost like fortresses. Let's see. So here's what Serapatamo looks like. Um, Forgive my pronunciation. I don't, what that means is dry river in Greek. There's, I think, a little spring that comes along here. But anyway, but this is so you have this is a sort of like a protected space. Inside is where the main church is. They have some chapels in there. They have some rooms for the monks to stay in, what they call cells, and rooms for the pilgrims to stay as well. And so people who visit the Holy Mountain, they may go to a particular monastery or they may visit several monasteries, and usually there's a guest master or two, and they receive the pilgrims, get them something to eat, find them a place to stay, and give them an opportunity to pray, essentially. So that's just trying to paint the picture a little bit. Um, let's see. This website just shows some pictures of like inside. So this is another monastery. It's not uncommon. Gary and I saw these where they basically built these unbelievable structures like right on the side of this the the sheer face of the peninsula, essentially. Um, and so, as we look at some of these pictures, these are some monks praying around some of the prayer books. This is a little oil lamp that they're singing with, so that's kind of typical monastic wear that they so they dress in black. They have sort of a head uh, covering of sorts that they use, especially in worship. Uh, this is a this is a picture not during worship time, but someone sort of tending the lamps in a smaller chapel. Again, someone lighting the lampadas uh, inside the church. And then this is more like what you might see like during a service where they're lighting candles, they're putting them out at different times, they're moving things around as the prayers are going on. And as it says, a monk lights candles during a midnight vigil, which is sort of a more festive type of service. And then this is just showing some construction, I guess, inside of one of the monasteries. So that's just to paint the picture just a little bit. We can go back to some pictures a little later on, but I don't want that necessarily to be the distraction from any of our what we might share. So Gary, I think we went with Father John, who was the priest in State College. Father John had actually written some things and that came to the attention of one of the abbots of the monastery, and so he invited Father John out to give a talk, probably in like 2004 or so. And as part of that, they developed a relationship. So I think another year or two later, he was wanting to go back and visit that monastery. And at that point, he was kind enough to say to us, "Hey, would you like to come along and check this out?" So you want to take it from there a little bit?
So what I remember, okay, again, this was a while ago. What I remember, we went into Thessaloniki first,
Yep.
and Father John showed us around there for a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, which I thought was interesting. It was interesting there because there was a church on every corner, and these little, I don't know what you would call them, but these little structures, not very big, maybe about 6 feet tall or a few feet wide, and where you could light a candle, and there's usually an icon in there or something, and they were everywhere also. So you had that aspect of Thessaloniki. Then they had selling pornography on the streets. So it was kind of a weird juxtaposition there, of those two things, as Greece has kind of gotten more secular. But it was interesting because you go in those old churches. I think one of the ones we went to that had the relics of Saint Demetrius, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and those relics were gushing myrrh. You could smell the myrrh coming off the bones
Mm-hmm.
of what they had from Saint Demetrius. They had a little area where they had this little structure that was where Saint Paul preached,
Mm-hmm.
and when he was in Thessaloniki, and that was kind of cool. You could go in there and just stand at the exact same place that Saint Paul stood while he was preaching. Um, and then so we went from there then to Mount Athos, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to Oranoupoli, I guess, is that what it was?
Yep,
And
that's right.
then you get a boat from there to Mount Athos. And it's kind of cool. You're coming up on them, you're seeing these monasteries and these skeets and stuff, and you get off the boat and you're on Mount Athos. And I remember wherever we had to walk to, and there was this hymn to the Theotokos just started going through my head. And Mount Athos is called the Garden of the Theotokos or something along those lines,
Mm-hmm.
where she's the one that kind of dedicated that. I think she was on a trip with St. John, the theologian, the apostle. If I'm getting any of these details wrong, let me know. And she kind of asked God to dedicate that to her son, and it's been a place of monasticism over the years. All males, females aren't allowed on the mountain. They don't want that distraction, and it's like no other place I've ever been. Just this, I was out at St. Anthony's, which was started by Elder Ephraim, obviously Saint Ephraim of Arizona, and it was kind of like a Mount Athos thing, but still didn't have that, even though he was like the saint of saints, and very, very, very probably the holiest person in the world at that time. He's since reposed, but Um, Still, that didn't have the same sense to me that Mount Athos did. So we went to what, Serpentamo, and we stayed there. And it was interesting when we first went in. So the abbot knew Father John and liked him. So he wasn't going to be there. So he told the guy there who spoke, one of the monks that spoke English, kind
Hmm.
of take us around and treat us well. So we come in there. The first day that we're there, first afternoon that we're early evening, I guess probably a vesper service or something. He takes us in. He sits us right down where the monks sit. You remember that? I
Hmm.
had no idea what was going on. All I know is these monks are looking at us like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just turning here because, somebody put me here. But I didn't really realize it at that time. That was very unusual. But, non-monks in that area, I guess. But he was doing what the abbot said. He took care of us. And they had the largest piece of the cross there, I think, I don't know, in the world, or at least in Mount Athos.
Hmm.
We got to venerate that. And a lot of people are skeptical of that these days, I think, because when the Crusaders went into Constantinople and so on and raided the place, they came back and they took a bunch of stuff, bunch of icons or relics and stuff. Relics are simply the bones of the saints. We believe that when somebody's really holy, that the Holy Spirit, penetrates even the body of that saint. And so the relics God can do miracles to those relics. It's kind of like in the Old Testament when they buried Elisha the prophet, and they didn't have time to bury him. They just threw him in the grave because the marauders were coming or something. They didn't have time to fill it in. And somebody was killed, and he threw him in the same grave, or he fell in the same grave. Whatever, you can see it in the Old Testament. And when he hit the bones of Elisha the prophet, then he came back to life. It's kind of that sort of thing. So I actually have some, just to jog my memory, I wrote some of these things down. So you may or may not know these names. You know some of them, obviously. If you're Orthodox, you may know others. Let's go through a couple of them. That Saint Gregory the Theologian was my patron saint. Uh, I think they had the right hand of Saint John the Baptist, which was something because that's the hand I'm sure he put on Jesus. Holy 40 Martyrs, Saint Basil the Great, Saint John Chrysostom, uh, St. Gregory Palamas, of course, St. Demetrius in Thessaloniki, St. Andrew, the Apostle, St. Silouan. And then we saw some wonderworking icons. We saw the one icon there where I think it was a Muslim. He came on and he stabbed the icon of the Theotokos, Mary, the birth giver of God, Theotokos, and started to bleed. And he ended up becoming a Christian after that, maybe even a saint. I don't remember. But we saw that icon. There's stuff so much there. We went to various monasteries. We stayed at San Gregorio for a night, and Saint Philotheo, I think, or Philotheo Monastery for a night. And it was the best. If you ever have a chance to go there, I'm gonna let Matt talk now because he actually went back then. And but anyhow, we'll hear a story. But if you ever have a chance to go there, and of course you have to be male, I would highly recommend you going there. Like Matt said, you need somebody to recommend you, so to speak. You have to get papers and everything, which we got when we were picked up at, or was it Orinoupoli? Was that the name of the
Hmm.
town? And but there's nothing like it. I don't think. I mean, you can't whitewash it though. I mean, there's problems everywhere. But as far as the holiness there and the sense that you get while you're there, there's just nothing like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to kind of go over our shared trip a little bit. Um, yeah, Gary mentioned a lot of the really important things. One of the things that I remember kind of standing out, um, at one point we went up to sort of the capital city, which is Karyes,
Oh yes, yeah,
Karyes,
yeah.
and we just sort of ducked our heads into the chapel for St. Andrew's Skeet, which originally was a Russian skeet. Um, so Panteleimon was the great big Russian monastery, and then there was St. Andrew's was the other sort of Russian skeet, although it was quite large. And then um, both Panteleimon and St. Andrew's, because of the persecution of the church during communist times, the monks, were not continuously heading to Mount Athos because the church was under such persecution. So St. Andrews actually went into disuse and has been repopulated by a group of Greek monks from the Philotheo monastery. At any rate, but we visited there just very briefly, and one of their precious relics there is the skull of St. Andrew, I believe, and they sort of take the cover off of that thing and you can venerate it. And that was probably the first time I had really encountered like a really fragrant relic or fragrance like that. Like it was just striking. The the grace of God had so penetrated Saint Andrew that that it smelled like, I don't know what to describe it. It was just, but it just filled that space, and so that was really special. Yeah, I think we went to Dionysiu for one night, and we went to Grigorio, um, and
We went to St. Bartolomeo for an afternoon or something and had dinner there.
mm-hmm,
And we walked there from St. Bartolomeo.
yeah, mm-hmm.
Right.
Um, so that was nice because that gave us an opportunity to sort of see some differences in the different monasteries. What you have on Mount Athos, you have Russian monasteries. I think there's a Serbian monastery. There's multiple Greek monasteries. There might be a Bulgarian one. And of course, you have monks of different nationalities all in each one. The one, Saripatama, where we went, there was at least a couple of Americans there, and some Greeks and some Germans and so on. Um, One other thing that's kind of broadly kind of interesting is like when we and I think Gary probably noticed this as well. Mount Athos is kind of like a place where people will go like to hike and adventure, and they're not necessarily there for like the spiritual life. They know the monasteries will take them in and feed them, and then they go hiking the next day, and but nevertheless, I think probably what happens is you can't help but be touched in some way by the holiness of the space. Um, and so yeah, it was just an unbelievable. Father John had told us as much. He said, Thessalonica is going to be great. We saw, um, like Gary said, we got to venerate Saint Demetrios and see where he was martyred. I think we also went to Saint Gregory Palamas's church in Thessalonica and venerated his relics, and that was unbelievable because we were seeing these. Uh, some of those little shrines that Gary was describing might have been like places where people were martyred centuries ago, and um, you just had that kind of connection to those things. But then, you take a bus down the coast, basically to Oranoupoli, which is this little town right on the edge of the peninsula. And then the next morning, you get on the boat, and the boat very slowly kind of seems to take you. It's motorized, but it takes you down the coast, and they have other boats for the other coast, basically. Um, but it just feels like you're not just moving through space. It's almost like you're passing through deeper and deeper into time because you just feel like
Yeah.
you're leaving civilization behind as you go, and you see these. You pass one giant monastery monastery structure and then it drifts into the distance, and you come to the next one, and you just can't even believe what you're seeing. Um, like
Yeah,
Gary
things you
would.
only ever saw in pictures. Saw
That's
them in
right.
pictures before, and there they are in real life. It was really
That's right.
something.
And you can't even believe that these things are stable and not falling into the ocean.
Yeah, because they're right on this, like you said, right on the side of the cliff, or even Simona Petra. I think it's just built right there in the cliffs. Seemingly, you wonder how did they do that? How they get all those stones up there and whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're unbelievable structures.
Um, and like Gary mentioned, this is a space that the Mother of God's the only woman who's allowed on this piece of land. There is a story of there was some queen who basically said, "Well, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to come here, and I'm going to give this, bring this great gift there." And essentially, the Mother of God appeared to her and said, "No, you won't. I'll take that from here." Our modern sensibility, even maybe as Orthodox Christians, to say, "Well, why can't women go to Mount Athos?" First of all, the Mother of God's made it pretty clear that that's not going to happen. Um, but also, it's simply just um, it's dedicated for the monastic life, so it's they're not wanting that distraction. There, I'm sure, female monasteries where it wouldn't be appropriate for a bunch of guys to come showing up on a bus or something. You know, maybe they have a priest there to serve the liturgy, but for the most part, it's women. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
it's somewhat unique, I think, in that way. Like even at St. Anthony's, though
mhm.
their friend who was on Mount Athos was St. Joseph Hesychast, women are allowed there. So, and maybe there's other places where they're not, but I think it's somewhat unique
Hmm.
in that way because like you said, it is the Theotokos' mountain, and
Yeah.
she's the only woman there.
Um, and you know, it's kind of striking when you realize that some of these monasteries have been there since 950 or something, or you know, I at one point I was thinking about the fact that you know there's probably some church or chapel where they've been let's say that they do three services a day in that space, and that's probably a minimum. That's not you know that's less than probably what they would actually do. But let's say they do three services a day. You do that every day for 1,000 years. You've done 1 million liturgical services in that space, and it that prayer has seeped into that land. Um, you know, uh, at any rate, so those are just some thoughts, I guess, related to our first visit there a little bit.
The other thing that, well, two things I wanted to, I don't think I finished the thought about the the Crusaders going in. If I did, you can just cut this out. But
Mhm.
um, the Crusaders going in and taking the relics and so on. What happens was they came back. A lot of people forged them too. So there was a lot of forgeries that came out of that. So now a lot of people are very skeptical of any relics. Like, oh, we have a piece of the cross. Yeah, well, so does everybody else because there was a lot of forgeries of it. But these things are meticulously, handed down, and there's no way they're going to be a forgery. But the other thing that really struck me was that we were taking monk took us down to this place, this little hut, not hut, this little structure with all the skulls. Remember that of all the skulls of the monks that had died there. And he said it's to remember, where we're headed, remember death. And so that was something going in there and seeing all these skulls just there, all these monks, and it's just this kind of hits you, yep, everybody's going to die, that we're here to prepare for death, make sure we end up where we want to end up. And it was just kind of like, I guess it was kind of normal. And the miracles, that they talk about, just kind of, normal,
Hmm.
so if people see miracles and well, yeah, okay, this is Mount Athos. These things happen here, and people aren't like, oh yeah, wow, that's cool, and everybody talking about it because it does happen. They do happen rather regularly there. So in any case,
Yeah, and I definitely felt like relics made more sense to me when we visited there because of course like after Vespers they would bring out some of their special relic. You know, all the monasteries have unbelievable treasures and manuscripts and probably many relics. But they would sort of most of the monasteries would find some time during the day to sort of bring out the more special. I mean, they're all unbelievable, but like you know, the more prominent, more maybe well known uh, saints and their relics. And so they would bring out, you know, at Sarapatamo, where we had been mainly staying, they have, like Gary said, the largest piece of the True Cross. They have the 40 Holy Martyrs, um, and I think maybe St. John Chrysostom, and a couple others. So, at any rate, whatever they bring out, the fact that they have this sort of organic connection. So it's not like, oh, look at this. This is so unbelievable and special. It's just like, okay, yeah, and this is so and so, and this is so and so. And you're welcome to venerate this because in the liturgical worship in that exact same space, they are also connecting to those saints throughout the year, whenever their feast days come up. It's just, and of course, it's been going on, you know, they've been worshiping in on Mount Athos for centuries, so there's that organic kind of connection as well. Um, so it just seems like a very natural thing. It's the same way that maybe when we come into Orthodoxy, there's this adjustment period where we say, well, how do we relate to the saints? And the truth is, the saints and the angels and the Holy Trinity, they're all together with us in the divine services, and we connect through that just very naturally because that's where everybody is. That's what's going on. And so the relics just find they're very normal, natural, organic context in the midst of, that type of worship year after year after year. So,
So
um,
then you decided to stay. No, you decided, we all went home. You decided you wanted to go back, right?
yeah, so probably I'm trying to think of, um, it was probably early part of 2007, so maybe like a year and a half or 2 years later. Um, and I had sort of been traveling around the country a little bit, and I was a single person, and I had just had just a wonderful experience on the Holy Mountain that first time. And of course, that was only over the course of maybe 4 or 5 days. And Father John, he said, it may be time to sort of investigate the monastic life. And I sort of felt I was a single person that, marriage didn't seem to be coming together in that way. And I wanted to make sure that I um, saw monasticism for what it was and gave it a fair shot as maybe being the path that I needed to move down. Um,
And ideally, don't you think that everybody should do that when they're young? Decide whether they want to go to be a monk or a nun or married, visit
yeah, I mean,
monasteries, visit monasteries, male and female, and just decide, hey, is this for me or not?
I think you have to at least be exposed to it enough to say that, oh yeah, for sure, this isn't for me. You know, and you know, I think probably throughout my life, I probably felt more inclined to be married. But I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just sort of seeking that in a maybe a selfish or kind of way. And yeah, it's probably something that's really good for a person to just ultimately that's what we're all making the decision for. Either we're uh, looking to be married or we're looking to become a monastic because in either case you're entering into this um, lifelong commitment in community for your salvation, right? Marriage is for your salvation. Monastic life is for your salvation. Um, so yeah, so I wanted to make sure that that was, and also quite frankly, the opportunity to go back there and to sort of see it more deeply and spend a bit more time seemed like a great opportunity. Um, so so Father John basically got in touch with the abbot, uh, Elder Joseph at Saripatama Monastery, the main monastery where we had stayed, and they said, "Sure, that's fine. You can, stay here for a couple months, um, and see what it's like, and kind of go from there." Um, so that was, I think, January of 2007, um, and once you travel there again. It's still like a real shock to be back in that space again. Flying to Thessalonica, taking the bus down, taking the boat to the monastery, and then suddenly you're in this. The bell rings at whatever 4 a.m., 3:30, and you're in the church, and it's kind of like I can't believe I'm in this space again. This is kind of surreal. Um,
Yeah, we didn't really talk about that at all. So the bell, so they wake up at like 3:30 in the morning, and the first service starts like four or something, if I remember right.
mm-hmm.
And they usually go like till what, 7 or 8, or I don't know how long they go to, a few hours. And then there's other services during the day, so everything's kind of structured around the services. But you get into that flow of things. At first, it is a bit of a shock, but then you get kind of into the flow of things, and It's really nice, actually. But the services are long, but like most Orthodox services, they're long, but they don't seem to take that long.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, at least for me anyhow, they don't drag.
Yeah.
You kind of all of a sudden it's the end, and 3 or 4 hours has gone by.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
Yeah. And essentially, I mean, the way that it worked was, so they, I stayed in one of the guest rooms. Yeah, the bell rings early in the morning, for Orthros, and pretty much it's Orthros and liturgy. Um, it's probably not quite as long on a weekday, but certainly Saturday and especially Sunday, it's basically like a vigil, so it's a bit longer on, especially on Sunday. And then so you get done with liturgy after the sun has come up, um, and maybe have a bit to eat, take a little rest, then get up. And for the most part, the thing that I was doing while there was just helping out in the kitchen. So, uh, you know,
and
uh,
and then whenever you stay at some a monastic place for a period of time, they do give you work to do, right?
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think Father John had sort of explained it like more or less it's a third of your time working, a third of your time praying, and then a third of your time maybe resting or reading or what have you. Um, so and yeah, you're it's not like you're not bored in that setting. It's just a very natural, wholesome life, and the monks there were very kind to me and very nice, and uh, the liturgical services were in Greek, but most of them also spoke English, so they would look after me in the kitchen and um, things like that, give me
So
extra
what they have
food
you
to
doing in
eat
the
because I
kitchen?
was a wimpy American and stuff like that.
So what they have you do in the kitchen?
What was that, Gary?
What did they have you do in the kitchen?
Um, Peeling vegetables and chopping things and kind of the food, simple food prep, that sort of thing. So during most of the year, the kitchen is preparing 2 meals a day. So kind of like a mid-morning meal and then a supper after Vespers. So they have Orthros and liturgy in the morning, and then they work throughout the day, and then Vespers maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock, and then they have their meal, and then a little bit of a break, and then Compline is sort of like bedtime prayers, and then off to their cells to rest and so forth. Um, let's see. So that was a that it was a little bit of an adjustment, almost physically, to get used to being up early again and so forth. Um, One thing that was kind of a shock also, I wasn't there very long before they had a vigil, which basically means it's for a feast. I think it was probably the feast for uh, the entrance of the Lord into the temple, which we celebrate on February 2nd. And so in that case, rather than having the bells ring at like 3:30 to be in church by 4, it's more like they ring at maybe 11:30 or maybe 11. So then they basically do a feast. So they start, they do Vespers, and then that flows into Midnight Office, and that flows into all sorts of other hymns, into Orthros, into liturgy. So it's basically they're celebrating that feast all throughout the night. And then it finally, then they have a morning meal, and then they kind of rest for a little while. And that was just that I was not prepared for that. That was physically really challenging, and I was like felt like I was falling asleep standing up. After the fact, I kind of realized one of the monks was the guest master, and he was I think he was from California, so he had been there about 8 years or something. So he of course could speak to me in English, and he said, "Yeah, the vigils, they're that we get up and we're praying, and it's more like 11:30 or midnight." And he's like, "Of course, that's our normal schedule. The monks, we in our cells, we normally get up at that time, and then we pray until they ring the bells, and then we go down to the church." So he says, "So you're just used to it." I'm like, "Oh man, like I thought I was really exerting myself because I would sleep through the night until the bells rang, and then I'd head on down." But the monks were already up for probably some hours doing their own prayer roll and reading and so forth. Um, So that was an eye opener as well. Um,
And that brings up some other thing that a lot of people, when they're looking into Orthodoxy, they see the long services or they see especially in the fasting. A lot of people say, "Oh, I can't fast meat for 40 days or whatever. I can't fast dairy for 40 days, or I can't these services or whatever." But God gives you the grace to do what He wants you to
mhm,
do.
that's right.
So for those monks, God gives them the grace to live that lifestyle, and like you said, and you'll acclimatize to it. And I assume you probably acclimatize to it eventually.
Yeah.
And God just gives you the grace. So if you're thinking about doing orthodoxy, going in looking into orthodoxy, but you don't think, oh, I can't do the fast and everything. Well, God will give you the grace. And as some of the saints would say, you do what you can. You can't
Hmm.
do it all. Okay, try it. You try to do a little bit more next time. And
Yeah.
eventually, bit by bit, God will give you the grace to do whatever you do. And all of it's done for our salvation. None of it's done just to beat us to the ground or something. It's all done for us, for our salvation. It's all good for us. And, and I was talking about this, something the other day with somebody, it's good for us to go through hard times, go through difficult times, go through suffering. It's good for us. We don't like it. Nobody likes it, I guess. But in modern day life, in most places, ease and comfort is what it's all about. So we have a much more difficult time with going through hardships or sufferings or doing things that maybe in the past wouldn't have been that wouldn't have seemed that difficult. That maybe have a different mindset. Life wasn't supposed to be easy and comfortable, but now we have that mindset. So, but again, I think God gives us the grace to overcome that if we want to.
Hmm.
So I would suggest nobody stay away from orthodoxy because you think, oh well, they're doing this fasting, they're doing this praying, have these some we still even in the churches today that's at times we have fairly long services, a few hours long. But again, God gives you the grace and it's good for you. It's good for
Hmm.
us. It's good for our salvation. None of it's done just to do it. Everything is for our salvation. And once in a while, somebody will say, "Well, God spared me from, or I was in a horrible car crash and God spared me, so He must have something for me to do." And He does. He wants you to
Uh-huh.
get saved.
Yeah.
Wants you to actually become godlike. He didn't save you so you can do some worldly thing that won't mean anything in eternity. He spared you so that you can, have salvation, and everything that we do is for salvation. All these things that Matt's talking about is for our salvation. But sometimes they have to be difficult, because that's the way you grow. I was telling this person that if you're going through tough times and you needed somebody with you, would you choose the person who never had to go through tough times? Or you through and always had it easy, or somebody went through tough times and got bitter and angry about it. Somebody went through tough times and learned and improved because of it.
Hmm.
That's what you want, and that's what helps us just in even normal life outside of church, outside of orthodoxy or being on Mount Athos, whatever. It's the difficult times. If we use them right, that allow us to grow. Not the easy times. The easy times are kind of like a rest, but it's the hard times that help us to grow.
Hmm.
So again, don't shy away from orthodoxy because you think it's difficult. It can be difficult, but it's good. It's for our salvation. It's for our becoming godlike. And there
Yeah.
shouldn't be any reason to shy away from something that's going to help you be godlike.
Well, and the thing is, those things are so incremental too. Like, the abbot at one point he was saying, would you like a prayer roll or something like this? And it sounds like the monks, their initial prayer roll, like when they're a novice or even before they're a novice, it might be like, say, 200 Jesus prayers. That's not a huge amount. You would think,
Yeah.
you know, um, and essentially, like you become a novice and they add a little bit more, and you become a full tonsured monk, and it's just a bit more. But none of that is so enormous. It's not, 10,000 Jesus prayers or something. It's you start small, like because it wants to be. Uh, Everything is sort of this organic, natural growth and it's all about engaging a real relationship with the Holy Trinity. The monks are getting up at 11:30 or 12 to pray on their own before all the services because that is what is going to be that sweet time with them and the Lord. That's what nourishes them throughout the rest of the day. It's all that kind of thing. Um, so
Everything's quiet. There's no distractions.
right, yeah, exactly. And we can we all can kind of adjust to a lot of things. We've all probably had tough work environments where you're almost amazed at how your body could adjust to that. How the physical strenuous nature of certain things or sports or something like this. So this is sort of fits
Yeah, I
in with
remember
all
being
that.
really tired when we went the first time at first.
Hmm.
But even then, by the time we left, after it was adjusted to it already by the time we
Hmm.
left.
Right.
And it didn't seem that difficult to get up at 3:30 in the morning. It was just part of your day. Just it
Yeah,
was, and everybody else was doing the same thing. So it wasn't unusual. It wasn't out of the ordinary.
that's right. Let's see. So I was there for a little while, and then Great Lent began. And what happens also in Great Lent is you go from having two meals to one, and the food is a little simpler. The services are longer at that point. So that was a real adjustment, an additional adjustment. But again, that's only for what, 6 or 7 weeks. Um, and that was really where I felt like you could really feel like you were getting into this rhythm because there were some additional services or more lengthy services. And then by the time you got to Saturday, where you were doing like a regular liturgy again and eating a bit more food, and then especially Sunday, it was like, oh, deep breath, and we're strengthened once again. And then we go back, and it's Monday, and we're putting in the work again. And you just go through that each week. Um, that was a really nice thing to go through. Um, I think at a certain point, um, I I was probably planning on going home before Pascha, and I had talked to someone, and he said, "Look, if you made it so far, you just need to extend your stay until at least Bright Week, which is the week after Pascha." So I did that. I was able to extend it another month. Um, Generally speaking, it didn't take me very long in my stay to say, you know what, I just don't think this monastic thing is for me, or at least here. But I really felt like it was my eyes were open to that it wasn't a good fit for me. So that first month was really difficult, I would say. It was very lonely. Uh, it was just hard. So that first month was difficult. And then it was like that second month was kind of like the adjustment period. And by the third month, it was lovely, you know? So I think that's probably like a small picture of what someone who is seriously investing themselves in looking into monasticism, it probably really tests you over time, and you probably wouldn't be able to get a good picture of that in just a few days. I think probably what happens if someone is really seriously looking at that, they find a place they like, they stay there, they work there, even before they're, the steps kind of work like this. You stay there for a while, you work there, you get to know the members of the community, you're praying with them, and then at a certain point they say, well, how about we make you a novice, which is basically like almost like an engagement, I guess, where you're on some level committing to that community, but it's also a period of, and it might be 3 years, 4 years, 5, 6, 7 years. It could be this extended period of time where you can walk away from it, and that's okay. Um, but really seeing if that's what you want to do. One of the things I've been to a tonsure for a nun. One of the things that's striking about a monastic tonsure, which is when someone is formally made a monk or a nun. Um, so a tonsure, they cut your hair so the whoever is doing this service, they give the person the scissors and they that or they no, that's not right. The person doing the service takes the scissors and throws them. The prospective monk or nun has to go get the scissors and bring them back. They throw them again. They have to bring them back. So in other words, making it clear this is of my own free choice, even in that ceremony. Um, so, at any rate, I obviously my period of investigation was just a few months, but if someone was really seriously looking into this, it takes years, basically, right? A long period of time to see if you become a novice. They make you a novice, then maybe participating in the services more fully, participating in the life of the community more fully, and then after, I don't know, let's say 4 years or something, they say, okay, it's time. We'll tantra you as a monk. We'll bring you into this community formally, and that's where you are sort of um, making that full commitment there.
So
Um,
first, what you want to do is this is what I've heard. I was married before I became Orthodox, so didn't really have to do any of this. But what I've heard is you kind of go to different monasteries, right, for a weekend, a few days here or there, just to check them out, just to see, hey, is this maybe a right fit for me? Then if you find one, you say, yes, I think this is it. Then you start to go through all the things that you were talking
mhm.
about. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and you just stay. I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing. You just stay, and you just uh, you know uh,
So
com-
if you want to go to a monastery, let's say in the States or whatever, wherever you are, you call
mhm,
them up and you get online or whatever, find out their number, call them up and say, I want to come for a weekend, I want to come for these
mhm,
dates or whatever.
mhm,
If they have openings, then you go there and they incorporate you for those 3 days. And we were only at St. Anthony's for a weekend, maybe 3 days. They already had us out there, sweeping the courtyard or whatever the first day.
mhm.
And they'll kind of incorporate you in. And then, but you have to call ahead. You're there, you're experiencing it. And a lot of Orthodox will go to monasteries just from time to time, just to get recharged or whatever. So
Mhm.
to go for a weekend or here or there, or take a vacation there for a week or something. What vacation? And always take off from their work and go to a place for a week that they like. And they're not going to become monks or nuns, but it's still a place to recharge. And the monasteries, ideally, are very open to that. That they want lay people to come in
Mhm.
and kind of get recharged there, and maybe I don't know, get something that maybe they couldn't get outside of there for a few days or a week or two.
Right.
So even if you don't feel called to be a monastic, you still can go to monasteries and be there for a period of time. Just call ahead and ask them, hey, when's a good time? Can I have
Mhm.
this time off? Can I come then or whatever?
Yeah.
And hopefully they can make time for you, make space for you.
Yeah, and you can, I mean, you're basically seeing a life that's dedicated to prayer and closeness to God, and that's the sort of example that we all can benefit from. Um, let's see. So, like I said, the first month was really challenging. The second month was uh, pretty okay, and then the third month was just really lovely. And Pascha, I got to experience Pascha on Mount Athos, which was wild, and um, I don't know, it was just really lovely, and I felt like, you know, well, this is unbelievable. This is, my uh, your eyes are kind of open to a little bit to sort of the light of the Christian life a little bit. And I also spent a little bit of time visiting a couple of other monasteries. I think I spent about maybe 5 or 6 days visiting some other monasteries. That was nice. You get to sort of see how the different monasteries are organized and how they do things a little bit differently. Every community sort of has its own um, personality and way of doing things. Um, I the last place that I went to on that sort of little go around was one of the monasteries that we had visited, which was Grigorio, and I got to chat with the guest master there that we had chatted with previously. Um, and that was really helpful. He was just he was a very he spoke with a British accent. I think he had grown up Cypriot, and then when he was a young boy, had gone to live in London. And so, but he just had a wild story, which was that he had a brother-in-law who said, "Hey, I'm thinking of going to the Holy Mountain on my holiday, my vacation. You want to come along?" He's like, I don't think so. And then at a certain point, he's like, maybe I will go with you. And he said, I didn't know anything about Orthodoxy. I, grew up. I guess he was baptized as an infant or whatever. But he said he knew that the Orthodox Church had no pope. Um, he had a couple of other like very basic ideas, but hardly knew anything at all. But he went to Gregorio. That was the first place they visited, And after they stayed for a few days, his brother-in-law was like, "Well, it's time to go home." And he said, "You know what? I think I'm going to stay on for maybe a few more days." And then he said, and I just never left. He just stayed on, and
Interesting.
he kind of was like formed as an Orthodox Christian there. Just found this place that he really loved, and I think his abbot, he really that's certainly a place. Gregorio, um, I said there's something about this monastery. It just it just has a certain like feel to it. It's like it's just so warm, and he said it's our elder. It's our elder. So he uh, the abbot at the time, I think he's now reposed, but the abbot, if you've ever seen, there's a little book called Theosis, The True Purpose of Human Life, um, by Elder George. So Elder George was uh, he was the author of that little booklet, but he was kind of apparently he was when Mount Athos, when the different monasteries needed to like make a statement about something, he would be the one that pretty much would write it, and then everyone would read it over and say, "Yeah, that looks good." So he just had a real gift for speaking the truth clearly, defining the doctrine clearly, and obviously a holy man. Um, but yeah, so he found his monastery, and I said, "Did you ever go anywhere else?" He said, "No, not really." And he said, "I was staying there a few days. He was staying there a few years, and then he was a novice." And he said, "And I left for a little while just to make sure that that's what I wanted to do. And then when I came back, the elder said, I'm thinking of of tantring you a monk now." And he said, "Okay, that's fine if you want. Either way, I just want to stay here, so I'm okay." It was like, uh, and he was the one that said that, all it really meant to me was that my prayer rule will be just a little bit longer. So, but he said, so it was really, he was a real example of someone that just, you know, uh, he found Christ in that place. And so he stayed in that place. It was lovely.
So he was baptized there. And,
I think he was probably baptized as an infant,
oh, okay.
just because he was from Cyprus originally.
Okay.
So he was also someone, he had had, he had had I had told him that I had been a teacher before. And he's like, "Oh, I have to tell you about this author that I really like." And I've since read all his stuff, named John Gatto. So because this monk had been in Cyprus as like a 5 year old, and then he went to London without speaking English, they put him through sort of like all the special ed in England, and he had a horrible public school experience in England. And so uh, I don't know. So he directed me to John Gatto's books, and he's like, this is really important if you're going to be a teacher." And that sort of opened my eyes to a lot of things, including homeschooling and so forth. So that was a really helpful encounter to talk with that monk for sure. Um, let's see, anything else. Um, I would say if someone is an American, I mean, I I'm I I will often think of things that happened over those 3 months, and I found it to be very helpful in one way or another. But I think if someone was seriously looking into monasticism as an English speaking American, I would start by investigating the monasteries in America, especially the ones that primarily operate in English. Um, the worship, the services in on Mount Athos at that monastery, for example, are all in Greek. So uh, if I had stayed there, the first thing that I would have done is probably go to Thessalonica for an extended period to learn Greek, so that I could then participate more fully in the services and so on. And that's a big commitment, and obviously God can work with that if that's what needs to happen. But to me, it makes a lot of sense to monastic life in America needs to be built up as well. Um, and if so, that would just be my thought. I feel like I was kind of, in terms of how I investigated the monastic life, a little naive in not looking more seriously at the English speaking places. So
But you wouldn't discourage anybody from going to Mount Athos.
No, I wouldn't. No, I don't know. I can just think of, for example, I visited St. Andrew's Skeet again when I went back. We had gone there, you and I, but when I went back, as I was kind of visiting different places um, in my time there, and yeah, I can remember getting to St. Andrew's Skeet and just sort of literally stepping on the land, and just feeling like, wow, this space. It's like there's something about standing on this space. It's So that's kind of how dense the grace is on Mount Athos. Is
Yeah.
even somebody like me who's not the most spiritually sensitive or whatever, you can just kind of feel like wow, this is lovely, this is peaceful, this is nourishing. Um, so yeah, it's really something.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the best trip of my life, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And we were only there for a few days, but and one of the things that the monk there, I guess he was the American you're talking about, and the abbot said to take care of us. He did give us somebody to take us places, so we don't have to walk everywhere. We walked to St. Pantelemo, but the other ones, he remember that he took us around and took us to
Mm-hmm.
different monasteries and different places, and
Yeah,
that was good also because we could get a wider view of things
that's
in that
right.
way.
Yeah, it's interesting. That monk who was, so he was an American. He had, at that point when I was visiting, he had been there, I think, about 8 years, and I've been, well, that was 2007, so that was what, 18 years ago. So he's now been there for 25 years, something like that. Um, and that's wonderful. But he said that as an American, he saw some documentary that said it was called like you know, a day is as 1,000 years or something like that. And it was basically about how completely primitive Mount Athos was and no electricity and all that sort of thing. Um, and then he said, and then I came to Mount Athos, and every monastery just about has generators and some electricity. Um, so you know, ultimately that doesn't really, like, there's not any electricity in the churches themselves. It's all candlelight and natural light. Um, but there's vehicles that, buses that drive you up the road, and jeeps and stuff that are making their way from place to place and so forth. So it's not completely totally primitive. It does seem like as you go further and further down the peninsula towards the mountain, it does get more austere. And so, as like the most extreme ascetics end up sort of like on that outer face of the mountain, heading out into the Aegean Sea. So, there are some places that are just like unbelievably remote and just uh, harsh conditions, living in little caves or little huts that they've built or what have you. So,
Yeah, if you want to read about something like that, My Elder Joseph, the Hesychast,
mm-hmm.
written by
Yeah.
Elder Ephraim, would be a good one. But they were very extreme ascetics. So if you want to read how they lived, that would
Mm-hmm.
be a good book to get.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it really is, it's the center of monasticism for all of Holy Orthodoxy, and to kind of go there is it's unlike anything else. That's for sure.
Well, good, good. That
Yeah,
was good to hear. Good to remember back to when I was there, and good to hear your experience. And
absolutely. Yep.
so if you're new to Orthodoxy and you're not sure which way to go, like Matt said, start with any monasteries you can get to in America. And, you can branch out to Mount Athos if you want, but ultimately, I think everybody as they're getting older really needs to decide: do I want to be a monastic or do I want to get married?
Mm-hmm.
And there's some exceptions to that where some people just stay single and they're not either one. The vast majority are either going to get married or be a monastic.
Right.
And if you ever have a chance to go to Mount Athos, I think we both would greatly encourage it because for me, it was an experience of a lifetime. And I think for anybody who's serious about going there and really experiencing it, it would be also.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, yeah. So that's about all I have to say. Yeah, it was
All right, that was
it
good.
was a lovely experience, and um, I think I was talking to the abbot at some point in my time there, and I said, this really just isn't for me then. And he said, well, now you know what you need to do: get married. I'm like, okay. And he's like, do they have matchmakers in America? I'm like, no, they don't. So he's from a
But
different.
eHarmony.
Yeah, that's right. So he's from a maybe an older Greek culture. So,
There's something to be said about those older cultures.
oh, for sure, absolutely, absolutely. So,
Right. Well, thanks, Matt. That was great.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad I could share that. And if anybody has questions of Gary or myself about our experiences or anything like that, or just you want to know more, our email is posted, I guess, at the beginning of each episode. So just send us those questions. All right. Well, Gary, it's getting late in State College. You
It's
know that.
always late in State College, and recently it's been pretty cold in State College.
Yeah. So, Christ is risen.
Indeed, he is risen.
All right. Well, have a good night.
You too.